So let me spend just a couple of minutes going through a few items, and then I'm going to turn you over to your leaders. So the idea is that when students choose leaders, in other words, they say these are leaders, they can learn from them. How do they learn from them? They can sit down, they can tell you what they've learned about leadership, or what you can do is you can listen to their story. And that's the idea behind this conference. You can learn about what leadership is, what makes a good leader, how do we measure leadership, how do leaders overcome obstacles, and how much of leadership is serendipity. We have a number of really visionary leaders today, and they're going to tell you stories about how they became, how they really got the jobs they did, how they overcame the challenges they did, and how they got to where they are today. We want you to walk away today inspired, and also to put some of the lessons you're learning into your own lives. Everyone here, simply by choosing to be here, is a leader. There are some people who have achieved a lot in their lives. There are a lot of people in this room who I expect one day to be standing up here telling their own story. And that'll be the real success. Now, in the first 3 years, we had leaders who generated a lot of money, inspired a lot of people. Sorry, I'm just going to have to look at the screen here. I'll come around. And overcame almost impossible challenges to transform their lives, the lives around them, and in some cases, even though I don't like to say this, the world. It happens sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways, but you need leadership to do it. Now, you're going to be hearing from different leaders. You're going to be hearing from me a little bit more about what they've done. But the leaders we have this year, I won't name them just yet, although you know who they are. One is a North American story. One is a story of inspiring Canadians with stories of human rights heroes, and in the course of doing that, becoming a human rights hero herself. And a CEO who works with the top CEOs in Manitoba to transform this province. We're also excited to welcome back one of the Asper School's best professors, as chosen by students, who you'll be hearing from as well. Many of you know who he is. And I wanted to give you some thoughts, and each year I usually share some thoughts about leadership. What is leadership? I don't want to say from an academic perspective, but let's say lessons that I've learned. And so, if we just turn to the screen for a moment, here's some things that we know about leadership. So this is the one part, maybe two parts of today, where it's not so much a story, it's more about, let's call it lessons learned, so that when you listen to the leaders, you can start to see whether or not where they fit into this framework of leadership. Because I think what you'll find is not every leader does everything that we say here, but there are elements of it. So leaders articulate a vision, they set a strategy to realize the vision, they mobilize a team to execute the strategy. They align stakeholders, they often, not always, compete with other leaders. And that's certainly in the market economy, but even in the public sector, the not-for-profit sector, you're going to find competition as well as collaboration. They're in the private sector, but they're also in the public sector and the not-for-profit sector. They are often thought leaders. No matter what their goals are, though, they need a vision, a strategy, and a team. So that's whether they're in the for-profit or not-for-profit. What are they trying to do in the for-profit sector? You've learned this at Asper. Those of you who are at Asper, and we have students here from other faculties as well. Leaders compete to maximize shareholder value, other goals as well. In public life, leaders are accountable to the public to provide public policy, goods, and services. In civil society, leaders of not-for-profit organizations advance public life. Community leaders and thought leaders mobilize public opinion. Now, some lessons in leadership. So these are drawn partly by my own observations, also by the literature in the past 50 years. So this is sort of a survey over the years. Effective leaders leverage people, processes, and technology. They promote and protect their organization's values. They communicate a clear sense of direction. They empower people, they motivate and inspire. They appeal to our need for fulfillment, belonging, recognition, achievement, and self-esteem. They consider the values of the people they're trying to motivate. They involve their team in deciding how to achieve the vision. And just stopping there for a moment, I spoke to one of our speakers today about this. We both agreed that if we had been talking about leaders from 30 to 40 years ago, some of this empathy, let's call it, wasn't always present. It also depends, there are differences in the private and let's call it not-for-profit sector, because in the not-for-profit sector, you're trying to motivate volunteers, where in the for-profit sector, there are salaries involved, and therefore the stakes are a little bit different. But as this individual said to me the other day, you cannot lead today based on, let's call it some of the autocratic methods from 30, 40 years ago. Leaders support their team's efforts by coaching, by providing feedback. They monitor, measure, and evaluate results. They are open to criticism and ideas. They encourage creative thinking. Some of the best leaders are quiet leaders. There's an entire article dealing with this because there's a myth, basically, that leaders are very charismatic, that leaders are very loud. There's some quiet leaders who lead by example, but also make points in ways that are not traditional leadership, let's call it. Leaders take their time. They often compromise, which is something that we don't always think about. They show moral leadership. It's very, very important if you have someone who's in a leadership position who's cutting corners or is not seen as being fair or ethical or moral. It is very difficult for them to lead because we want to see our leaders as being moral. I don't know that we can get through the day without mentioning Donald Trump, so we should probably just get it out of the way and mention his name, because as we're going through this, you might see, the nickname for the President of the United States is the leader of the free world. So the word leader is in the title. So does he lead using any of these, or, well, let's say certainly some of these, but not a lot of the ones that show empathy. And that's probably because he was leading a private company before where he didn't even have stakeholders. So question always to ask yourself is, can you lead when you're not really a leader? And in the polling numbers in the United States, it reflects the fact that people don't always see him as being a leader. So that's something to remember. It's not that you can't lead, we're talking about good, effective leadership. They're also willing to deviate from accepted practices. So Trump definitely falls into that. That's what I'm going to get. He deviates from accepted practices. But the reason I'm putting that here is that sometimes you work outside the box, and that shows leadership as well. I'm not saying you always do that or should do that, but it's something that that often happens. This is a bigger room than I thought. Here we go. Leaders align and motivate teams and individuals. So there's a lot in every sentence here. So aligning interests and motivating, both at the team level as well as at the individual level. They collaborate and help others learn how to collaborate. And when Lucas speaks, I think he's going to be elaborating a little bit more on leaders working together. Leaders consider the effect their decisions will have on others outside their organization. They understand their stakeholders, their competitors, and the environment in which they operate. If they don't, it's very, very difficult to lead. Leaders are always thinking strategically. I've had many clients over the years who fit into the category of leaders, not just in Winnipeg, but around the world, and this is something I've always observed, is if I can put it a certain way, I'm not saying everyone would agree with this, but I sometimes say leaders are thinking at 20,000 feet and on the ground. Effective leaders are doing both. They're not just caught in the weeds, they're not just up in the clouds, they're operating at both levels. Leaders are patient but they're impatient when they have to be. This slide used to say leaders are patient until I read an article that talked about impatience, because a lot of leaders that we all know are impatient, and that's sometimes a good thing. Leaders motivate others to lead. I once read that the number one job of a leader is to get others to lead. So it's a very, very important point. This one I won't spend as much time on. Leaders need to focus their attention 3 ways. So let's just say inward, and I'll expand a little bit on this. On others, the others who are around them, and outward. So now let's just turn to characteristics of strong leaders. And again, this is not uniform, but this is a combination of observations and what the literature says. So this is almost aspirational, I'll say. The fact that the word aspir is in aspirational is just a coincidence. So self-awareness, the ability to recognize, understand your own moods, emotions, and drives, as well as your effect on others. Leaders with the highest self-awareness are confident, they make realistic self-assessments, and they often have a self-deprecating sense of humor. Self-regulation, those first 2 ones are directed inwards. The ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods. Just thinking of that for a moment, we're human beings, road rage, and I often talk about this actually because it's such a fascinating, incredible subject. Should I even say, I tell my wife never to honk the horn, just because of the primal reaction that gets in others, even when they're wrong. And all of us have experienced that. I think I was honked at this morning, actually. So, but can you control or redirect those disruptive impulses and moods, to suspend judgment, to think before acting? The best leaders are trustworthy, they have integrity, they are comfortable with ambiguity, and they're open to change. Because when you're in a leadership position, very few things are black and white. The question is, can you deal with that ambiguity? They are motivated. This one I really find fascinating. They have a passion to achieve for reasons that go beyond money or status. Because even though none of us wants to think this way, that's usually the way that people are motivated, is they get paid more, they have status. But all of the people in this room, I think, will recognize this statement, which is they are motivated for reasons that go beyond money or status, and they pursue goals with energy and persistence. They are optimistic even in the face of failure. I can't overstate that one, because you're going to hear today from leaders who will tell you about failures they face and overcome. They are committed to the organization and the vision. There has to be loyalty to the organization. You have to be able to place the organization, I don't want to say above yourself, but let's say identify with it so that you're aligning your interests with the organization. Empathy. So this is a word that you've all heard a lot about. The ability to understand how others feel, what they believe, what they want. Leaders with empathy care about the people they're leading. They know how to build and retain talent, how to meet the needs of others. They give people what they need, not always what they want. And I will say, when you're younger, this is something this is through observation. I went through this myself, though. I'm not saying that you're always trying to give in to someone who's a little bit older. They look at you sometimes as, they don't see you exactly for what you are. They just see you sometimes as a younger person, up and coming person, a person who has to earn their way up. So there's a lot that goes on in the way that people perceive each other. So in terms of empathy, what you might want to do as you start to move into leadership positions is to think about this statement that you're not always, I'll give you a very simple example. If you have to dismiss someone, I mean, that I remember when I was younger, I used to say I could never do it. It's how could you do something like that because you're ruining someone's life? But these are the kind of decisions you have to make, and sometimes it's better for the person themselves, sometimes it's not, but these are decisions you have to make. But really, when you're dealing with people, giving them what they need sometimes means not giving them what they want. Social skills. Now, the best leaders, even if they're quiet leaders, even even if they're not charismatic leaders, are proficient in managing relationships and building networks. They have an ability to find common ground, to build rapport. Strong leaders are effective in leading change. They're persuasive and expert in building and leading teams. Now, there's a lot in here, but I would say you're not really seeing charisma in here. What you're seeing is an understanding of human nature. If you understand human nature, this is something that I didn't really think about until I was probably in my 30s. The more I read about it, and I read a statement that I thought was excellent. It said, as a human being, you're an expert in human nature. You are born trying to understand other people. You are sense-making machines. That's what you're always trying to do. It's a survival mechanism. It's there to protect you. It's there to have you move forward. So you are experts in it. But I will say that most of human nature is completely counterintuitive. And if you ever read books like Predictably Irrational, you'll start finding out about what it is about us that doesn't make sense. It's not intuitive. So I suggest that you become formal students of human nature. That will make you better leaders. Read about it, spend time trying to understand why others are doing what they're doing. Once you understand that, because you're in the business of inspiring others, motivating others, mobilizing others, anything is possible. Authenticity. This is a word that I don't think I knew what the word was, but I didn't hear it in the context of leadership until maybe, I don't know, the last 10 or 15 years. For the students in the audience, is this a word that ever comes up academically in class? Is this a word that you hear about? Yeah. It is, okay. Very, very important word, because again, going back to human nature, if someone, and you'll know this from your personal relationships, if someone comes across as insincere, as glib, as not believing in what they're saying, you don't believe what they're saying. You don't trust them. And in this business, the business of leadership, at the end of the day, trust matters. So authenticity matters, because strong, and here's a point that's not, again, intuitive, strong leaders selectively show their weaknesses. This is something that I would say that most leaders do not like to do, because they associate strength with leadership. Counterintuitive. Weakness is also part of leadership, because weakness is part of being human, and it's one of the ways that we build trust. So showing that weakness makes you more authentic. Exposing your vulnerabilities reveals your authenticity, your approachability, humanity, builds credibility and trust. Now, am I suggesting that you walk around showing how weak you are? No. But I'm just suggesting that you show how human you are. And this is simply a part of it. Intuition. Now, it's interesting. You know, Trump says that he relies on intuition, that this is how he makes decisions. And we make decisions in two ways. We make decisions quickly and slowly. Quickly is intuition, and we're good at it, actually. We're good at it. Most decisions we're making, you know, as we go through our day, are intuitive. There's stuff that's sort of baked, either it's baked into our DNA and our genes, or it's something we've learned and little shortcuts. But at the same time, you have to, we all recognize that there are certain decisions that we have to be reflective about. My advice to you on this is you can do both all the time. It's how reflective you want to be, how much due diligence you want to do. You know, I will say, young business people, professionals, I mean, I fell into this trap. You tend to be overly reflective. You tend to worry about failure, worry about mistakes. So, you know, the old expression, trust your gut, is trust your intuition. You know, Ronald Reagan used to say something, trust but verify. So, and that he didn't mean it in this sense, but, you know, yes, trust your gut, but reflect on it in each case. So again, unless you're talking or thinking about something very basic, but if you've got decisions to make, this is an important one. Okay, now, back to the front here because the good stuff starts. I want to call up our first speaker, Kevin Chief. Now, all of you have had gotten some materials that show you or that tell you a little bit about everyone's background. And Kevin's background is an incredible background. I just want to highlight a couple of things which you've read. Kevin was an MLA. Kevin was a minister in a number of very, very important areas in this province. At a very young age, he was a trusted leader. He was selected, elected by the people in his riding, in his constituency, to represent them. He was selected by the Premier to serve in cabinet. Other people recognized his leadership. He also was an athlete. I can remind people of that, I'm sure. I'm sure you do, so. And you'll tell us about that, I'm sure. And a good one, an all-star. And he has now moved into the private sector, not-for-profit, sort of the intersection of the two as the Vice President of the Business Council of Manitoba. I will tell you that the way we select leaders who speak to you is usually we start with a very, very large list. And I step out of it at that point. So in other words, I help develop the list. The students decide, some of the people in this group decide who our leaders are going to be. Kevin Chief is one of the three that they selected. So I'd like to welcome Kevin Chief.